Okay, we're in Petah Tikva, Israel, and today I'm with Roi Mor from OpenLegacy. Roi, is that correct?
Yeah, hi, nice to meet you.
Are you ready to give us some insights?
Sure, looking forward. Yeah.
Okay, Roi, so what does OpenLegacy do? What's the product?
Yeah, so today's challenge, mainly in enterprises, we focus mainly in financial sector, but it's also relevant for a lot of other sectors, is becoming digital. And truly digital means eventually, be cloud ready, API, and so on. Things that SaaS companies are by nature born that way, basically. And legacy and enterprises based on legacy system. That's the brutal truth, basically. All banks, I think 95 plus or Fortune 500 banks, Fortune 500 general and I would say top 100 banks absolutely relies on mainframes, mainframe and likes. And we eventually enabled to create in a very agile, robust way APIs from those legacy systems. We do that without touching the legacy system. We enable them to run in the most modern API platforms, we enable them to run in cloud, enable them to be packed as microservices very easily. And we work with a lot of tier 1 banks globally, started in Israel, around the globe basically.
So essentially as a middleware to connect legacy systems to the more modern services out there.
It's enabled, of course, to any channel. It could be an AI, it could be a chatbot or whatever, or of course a mobile application web consuming those APIs basically, which encapsulate basically the business logic of the organization, runs on those legacy systems. And we touch, of course, a lot of those legacy systems, and it's basically that's kind of our core what we do. I would call it kind of a more modern and light middleware. We do that's very different from traditional middleware. That's kind of what we do. We do it basically with code generation versus traditional black boxes, done by the modern middleware players.
What's the business model? Is it SaaS? Is it on-premise? Is it professional services heavy? What's the type of business model?
The product is focused a lot on automation. So basically every client we get into has different transactions. It's not you replicate, you connect to a Salesforce and basically it's the same business logic or the same. We connect to a bank which has a 40, 50 years old homegrown written COBOL typically application, and we need to analyze it, understand and create APIs from that very quickly. So we run typically on-premise, but that's kind of the historical 6-7 years, but in the last 1-2 years we actually started to see early birds starting to run workloads on the cloud. It is true that banks start moving things to the cloud, but they're very conservative, everything that connects to their legacy system. That's kind of the backbone. This is kind of runs the organization, so very cautious with that, So we're starting to see early birds around that, yeah.
From what I'm hearing from you, it's very professional services heavy, the implementation phase.
The actual, I would say, creation of the API is done very quickly. We create API in typically a few hours, of course with in some cases even a few minutes, Of course it relies on testing each API, documenting we are not professionals ourselves doing it. We have our what we call customer success team that walk through the client in that start of the journey, let him feel comfort, building with him the first 5-10 APIs, and then eventually they build an API. We help them build an API factory. So based on their organization standards, security, deployment, and whatever they use to their configuration tools and so on, we adapt the platform to work in the organization standard with our standard tools. And eventually, after 1-2 months of holding their hand, the customer is running it by himself, basically. Or SI, service integrator, does the work, depending on the client choice, basically.
Let's take, for example, an average bank that uses OpenLegacy. What's a typical or an average deal size that you're doing? Is it in the millions of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars? Is it tens of thousands of dollars?
It's usually the hundreds of thousands of dollars every ARR. That's kind of the average. We have, of course, a few ones that are in the millions. Historically, we have, of course, one smaller, but that's kind of the average, yeah.
And then the split then between, in an average deal, between the professional services and the actual licensing. Is that like a 50-50 split? Is it more?
No, it's purely licensing. We have some small set of usually dozens of hours as kind of the walking through the client. That's kind of how we do it. Intensive support in the beginning, of course, training and so on, getting them on board. But eventually, ever since it's plainly support, we do remote support, especially now in the COVID-19 days. So that's because usually, so practically it's always a license deal, yeah.
What are you pricing against? Is it number of users? Is it the number of APIs?
Yeah, basically number of APIs. That's it's more sophisticated than that, but the score is a number of APIs. How many APIs the plan? We're not charging based on usage and on things like that, but that's kind of the model. The clients like it because they know they need to tackle this and this and this areas in the business, and they can estimate how many APIs. They don't have no idea how much the digital is eventually going to consume API. So we let them start, build as much API as they want, and so on.
And are you guys VC backed or are you bootstrapped?
Yeah. We started as a bootstrap in the first 2 years, but we're in the last almost 6 years. Yeah, 6 years we're VC based. Sorry.
How much have you raised?
So far, $70 million up to date.
Wow.
60 of them in the last 2 years. Okay. So the first 5 years was very modest, but in the last 2 years we really significantly grew up. We opened regions in every continent, offices, and we actually have clients now every region practically, banks mainly, and financial institutions. And we're supporting here from this office basically all those sales operations and customer success and so on.
So what's the team size of OpenLegacy today?
Over close to 100 globally. Almost half of it is here in Israel. R&D, product support, finance, HR, operation, and so on. And the management is globally basically split. Me and Romy, the second founder, are based in Israel. Ron Rabinovich is the president, is based in Geneva. Our chief product officer is based in New Jersey. So
a global company.
Yeah, absolutely.
And from what I'm hearing, you're already in the selling stage, revenue-based stage.
Absolutely.
It's not in a piloting.
No. We are already generating revenue almost for day one. We have, of course, we moved in the past couple of years to ARR model. Last 3-4 years. Now we have dozens of financial institutions, all of them tier 1, tier 2 organizations, very large. So it requires a lot of, at the beginning at least, support. Eventually, once they get to production, we're here to stay.